See? That's strong, manly love. It makes demands and it says, look, you're one of mine and I love you, but by God, I love you enough to say you're screwing up, and you gotta come back. See? All right. Now, so let's rescue love. You see what I mean, from this sort of cheesy, sort of syrupy thing that it's been turned into. All right. So it's a good, strong, vigorous love. See? And yes, it has a tenderness about it. Okay. So those are the three theological virtues. Now, as far as the other virtues, the cardinal virtues. All right. So again, I want to talk a little bit about prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. But I particularly today, for our sake, want to focus on fortitude. And we'll see how it needs to be, if you will, governed by both prudence and also patience and meekness. But again, a quick word about each of the four cardinal virtues, all right? So, prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Now, prudence, in a way, St. Thomas Aquinas says, is the charioteer of all the virtues. But here, too, we have to rescue the word prudence from the modern usage. Most people think prudence means cautious, forever cautious. Careful, cautious. No, that's not what prudence is. Prudence is the virtue that says, look, I've got a goal. I'm heading there. Now, what's the best way there, given the current circumstances? So I'm looking out over the valley here, and let's just say I'm trying to get over there to that next hill, but I see there's a flood on this side of the valley. See, that may be the quickest route, other things being equal, but I see a flood, so I say, well, I'm not going that way. I'm going to go around this way. No, sorry about that. Thanks. I'm using this for a paperweight, y'all. A necessary evil. But anyway, so prudence is, what is the best way forward to my goal, given the current situation I'm in? So it may be cautious. It may be careful. This is not the time. Wait. It could say that, but it might say all the more. This is the opportune moment. Now we move, and that's prudence as well. So again, prudence is sometimes I need to act forcefully and manfully in this moment. Other times I need to keep my powder dry. You ever notice that when people tell you to keep your powder dry, they seem to. Well, you're supposed to keep your powder dry to use it eventually. They never seem to get around to saying, now it's time to use it. All right. But again, there are, so it can be caution, but it might at other times mean full steam ahead, charge. Now's the moment. Okay. So prudence is the charioteer of the virtues, and it's a judgment of the intellect, given the situation I see in front of me, what's the best way forward to my goal? I want to die loving God and my neighbor and spend eternity with God. And I want to take as many people with me as I can. So, I get a call coming all the way out to Purcellville. That's a long drive, and I got a lot of stuff in my schedule. Well, Father, we're going to have a good number of men there. I'll be there. No. Again, I can't go everywhere and do everything, but you see, the point is, I want to get to heaven, die loving God and my neighbor, and I want to take as many as I can with me. So, hey, it's a great opportunity, right? Right? So I love to do priest retreats for the same reason. These are really opportune moments. Now, again, this is what prudence does. Now, I got to move quickly through these. I'd spend more time, but I can't. Prudence, justice. It means to render to each, to render to others what is due to them. What is due to them. And again, it calls us to a certain duty, but it also calls us then to realize that, again, justice will sometimes say, look, I've done what I can here. So again, it's a moderating virtue, but it helps me to give to others what is due to them. All right? Let's move on, though. Prudence, justice. Now, temperance, again, I think most of us are pretty aware that temperance is a hard thing, but it's a necessary thing. I haven't quite learned it with food. But again, we know that we have to moderate all of our passions. Now, all the passions are good. The way of moderating them isn't to say, you're bad, go away, but rather to simply say, to moderate, to have appropriate amounts of food or sexual things in the marriage, or in and to know the proper place of certain things, and to moderate all of our passions. There's a time to be angry. For example, we'll look at meekness in a minute, but meekness is the middle ground between too much anger and not enough anger. Wake up, my brothers. Some of us aren't angry enough. There's a place for anger, right? All right, we'll talk about that more in a moment. But again, so we moderate. And moderate means, St. Thomas has this, he defines virtue this way. Virtus est, virtus stat in medio. In medio stat virtus is the way he puts it in the Latin. In the middle. we find the virtue in the middle. That's the virtue. So for example, we'll look at fortitude in a moment, more detail, but let's just examine. Fortitude could have either excess or defect. And we all know that defective fortitude means to be a coward, right? Or to be deflated, or to just... But what's the excess of fortitude? Any ideas? Father, I didn't know there was possible to have excess in the virtues.
Arrogance.
Arrogance, okay. And someone else said, anyone else?
Pride.
What's that?
Pride.
Pride, okay.
Daring.
Hmm? Yeah, to be maybe rash or too daring. To just rush into trouble without even thinking. You know, it doesn't mean you just... Trouble's there, just rush toward every trouble, right? So that's the fundamental thing. That is to say, to become rash and it's a form of pride, but fundamentally, yeah. So the excess of fortitude would be to, in an irrational and foolish way, just being foolhardy or rash and rushing into trouble when you should have said, no, wait a minute, let's study this a bit. Let's develop a strategy. Okay, so we're trying to see, therefore, that temperance is that virtue that helps us to moderate so that we have virtue. Okay, it's a virtue itself, but it also helps us, like prudence does, to moderate all the virtues as well as exclude the vices, and it helps us to, again, reach our goal, which and not to become, in the case of, say, fortitude, to be either foolhardy or cowardly, but to know that in the middle, in medio, stat virtus, in the middle, that's where we find the virtue. All right. Now, that's with all that in mind, I want to spend a little more time now with fortitude and talk with you about it. So let's, I'm going to just dig into some of my notes here and try to bring this thing in for a landing. Again, remember our context. We are at war. We're in a battle. And the first place we've got to conquer is right here in our own heart. Right? So some of these virtues we talked about. But once we begin to grow and begin to master and begin to see these virtues come alive, is part of then our love and care for others, that we should help others to master the virtues, to summon them to truth, courage, and so on. Summon them to love. All right. Now, fortitude. Let's consider, first of all, I want to show you that fortitude all by itself could be problematic. It needs to be, as we say, moderated by prudence, also by patience and meekness. So first of all, let's define fortitude. Because I think a lot of people just think of fortitude as courage. It's just another word for courage. It's a little more than that. It's a little more. Consider first that fortitude is a virtue that enables us to withstand. Did you hear that word? Withstand. Even great difficulties that hinder us from attaining to our goals. A chief feature of fortitude is enduring difficulties and seeing an act or a decision through to the end. Thus, it is not merely being brave in the face of danger or sallying forth into battle. It is also being steadfast in spite of obstacles and enduring without sadness or loss of faith. My brothers, we need fortitude, not just because we need courage to run into danger in times, but we need fortitude because, frankly, a lot of things aren't going to change very quickly. It's going to take a long... This is a distance run. This is not a sprint. And you need endurance. And you're going to have trials, and you're going to have setbacks. You're going to be discouraged about yourself sometimes. You know, God, I thought I was getting over that, and all of a sudden I just vented my anger, and I burned all these bridges with my kids again, and what the hell was I doing? And you can get discouraged pretty quickly. Or, we look at our culture today, and I'm like, God, how are we ever going to turn this mess around? It's like trying to turn an aircraft carrier around. How are we ever, all that inertia heading right to hell? And we're just little us, and how are we ever going to do this? See? You can feel pretty quickly discouraged, and you got to remember, this is a long battle. This isn't one you're just going to win in a fortnight. This is going to go on for generations. And you see that it's been here from the beginning, this incredible war in the whole cosmos between Satan and his forces, and Michael and the archangel and all of God's forces. And we're caught up in this battle. God has assured the victory, but he's saying it's going to take a lot of cleaning up action. And it's going to sometimes feel like a long battle. When will it ever end? And we think we finally made some progress, and then, I don't know, the election cycle switches, or a bad thing happens in the church, or someone we were really trusting, just let us down. So you see, this is where fortitude is needed, see? So again, I want to just say, not just bravery, but think of other words that are in the definition. Words like endurance, enduring difficulties, seeing something through to the end, right? Withstanding, okay? withstanding, overcoming hindrances or obstacles. Another obstacle in the way. Keep working. Build a bridge over it. Whatever we're going to do, let's keep working, keep working. That's a lot of work. Keep working. Preach, preach, preach. Never stop preaching, never stop teaching. But they're all laughing at me. Preach. Well, it's not, the other team seems to be doing better. Keep preaching, keep teaching, keep loving, keep insisting on the truth. Keep going, keep going. Never give up until the day you die. The Lord says, you're out of the battle now. I'm taking you home. But never, ever stop fighting. And that's what fortitude is about, okay? Now, as with any virtue, there are certain sins, though, that can emerge by excess or defect in relation to fortitude. So we already talked about some of these, but let's just list a few others. We call them timidity, pusillanimity, kind of being small-minded or that way, right? Faint-heartedness or softness are defects of fortitude. That's what Thomas lists them as anyway, right? But likewise, there are excesses, such as being foolhardy or presumptuous or overly ambitious, vainglorious, or here's the worst one, headstrong. Thomas calls it being pertinacious in the Summa, all right? Pertinacious. Love those old-fashioned words, aren't they great? Being headstrong, okay? All right. Now, so again, thus patience and meekness are aspects of fortitude, especially in helping us to govern any excesses related to fortitude. While the modern mind considers them to be in opposition to fortitude, they're actually integral parts of fortitude, namely, again, meekness and patience, right? You see, well, most of us have had too much of a steady diet of adventure movies. You know, I'll save you some money. You know how all the adventure movies go. The movie opens with some unambiguously evil person blowing something up or killing lots of people. Unambiguously evil. But politically correct, you know, they're not the wrong kind of race. But unambiguously evil person does a horrendous, heinous act at the beginning of the movie. Our hero, who is flawed but a good guy, steps onto the scene. And after about 90 minutes of killing people, breaking things, blowing stuff up, car chases, car crashes, he comes to the final showdown with the unambiguously evil person and kills him. And then the police finally show up about 20 minutes late. And our hero walks off. You gotta have the girl. He got the girl in his arm. Burning city in the background. Roll credits. So I just saved you some money. Every adventure movie has the same plot, right? Okay. So, but again, you see, this is a kind of a machismo kind of version of fortitude that probably lacks the, like, first of all that stuff's unrealistic. You don't walk away from a car crash. Even a 15-mile-an-hour car crash, you got real bad injuries setting in. You know, you're not walking away from that. You know, they just walk out of these completely wrecked cars and chase them down with a gun. You know, come on, that's crazy. That's insane. You're probably knocked out is what you are. But anyway, all that aside, you know, blowing stuff up and all these things, it all kind of fuels, though, this sort of attitude. Just blow up stuff, break stuff, and that ushers in justice. No, it doesn't. It doesn't usually work that way. I'm not saying we don't sometimes have to go to war. It's a terrible thing. But I'm just saying to you, that's not the normal way we're going to see fortitude work out in our life. So it's a kind of a cartoonish version of fortitude, right? Of sort of a false bravery. Now, so why do we then so thus we therefore want to say that part of fortitude is to be aspects of it are both meekness and patience. So let's look at them, because they help to govern excesses that might come with fortitude. So let's look at patience for a minute. This is perhaps the most frequent form under which fortitude is exercised in the face of life's difficulties. St. Thomas says that patience is attached to fortitude because it helps us to resist giving way to sadness and to bear up under the difficulties of life with a certain equanimity or a steadiness of our soul. And so that by it we don't easily give way to emotional sadness or to excessive anger or depression, right? Thus, patience is an act of fortitude, since it bids us to endure even painful or difficult things without weakening our faith or our commitment to the truth. With patience, we are steady in the face of vexations and the contradictions of life. Thomas is a pretty smart guy, isn't he? Now, here's what, a lot of times people say to me, Father, and they're in confession, Father, I was impatient. So I say, well, you know what patience, because sometimes for people, the word patience is abstract. What does it mean to be patient? To be patient, it comes from the Latin, the word patior is at the root, it means to suffer. So patience is the capacity or willingness to suffer for the sake of some greater thing, right? So I need to bite my tongue here and talk later about this, or I need to accept this setback and keep journeying in the right direction. So again, it means that there is a capacity or a willingness to suffer for some greater good, maybe for the fight for the truth, or the, just because I really love my wife and she's driving me crazy, but this is not a good time to get her to stop driving me crazy. So for the sake of love or the relationship, I'm going to just smile. Now, again, all of these things, sadly though, many in our culture equate patience with weakness. To be patient, though, as St. Thomas says, is to be able to endure with great strength. Now the fact is that many troubles and contradictions in our life are going to last for a long time. Things aren't just going to go away in a 90-minute adventure movie. That's the other thing about those movies, right? Everything is solved in 90 minutes. Now never mind all the lives that were ended, never mind the burning buildings and even burning cities that need to be repaired and rebuilt, and all the property loss and the economic setbacks, and just look at those 2 Twin Towers and what that did to our economy, right? Never mind all those effects, but the adventure movie, everything's solved in 90 minutes, and everything's fine, and God, all goodness has been restored. No, it hasn't. All right, but you see the idea. Many in our culture forget that many of the troubles and the contradictions in our world and our life last for a long time. Not all, even most things can be changed for the better, simply or quickly. So patience and suffering are necessary acts of fortitude. They require great strength and brave endurance. Jesus says in the John chapter 16, he says, in this world you shall have tribulation, but have confidence. I have overcome the world. Right? Again, let me repeat that. In this world ye shall have trouble. All right? So it's not just a prediction, it's a statement. It's going to happen. All right? But have confidence. I have overcome this world. All right, so again, in the St. Paul adds, remember when he and Barnabas were in town and there was some struggles going on, and Paul and Barnabas in Acts chapter 14, they said, it is through many tribulations that we must enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so it's the way of the cross. It's going to happen. It's going to be troubles. There's going to be trials. There's going to be difficulties. There's going to be setbacks. So, while fortitude will often summon us to face danger bravely, right? To proclaim the faith and to do what's right, certainly the fortitude will rebuke any cowardliness or faint-heartedness in us, or any softness, but fortitude will also, and must also, through its aspect that we call patience, will help us and call us to be patient, if you will, to avoid excessive anger, to endure difficulties without sadness or fear. Okay, so again, the modern mind doesn't connect patience and fortitude, but Thomas, who was a smart guy, did. And it's an aspect of fortitude. Now let's talk about meekness. This is an even harder concept for most, because most people think meek equal weak. Meek means spineless. Meek means you're a pushover. You're easy. An easy target. Meek is, it's the opposite of strength, right? That's what most people do. Let's first of all, let's define meekness. Now Aristotle, and Thomas just took Aristotle, the Greek word that we translate meekness is prootes, and the word meek in both Aristotle and the Aristotelian schema, and then which Thomas then just took over, meekness is the proper middle ground between too much anger and not enough anger. And that second part most people miss. Because you see, meekness, who are the meek? The meek are those who have authority over their anger. They command their anger. They're not swept away by it. Now that's strong, that's not weak. Many of us are very, very weak when it comes to our anger. See? Well, it just sweeps us away, and we say and we do rash things, and we think that just venting and screaming and hollering is going to accomplish something, right? So again, to have authority over our anger is a sign of great strength. And is part of fortitude, because in battle, it's hard not to be angry sometimes. And not all anger is bad anger. I don't know if you notice when you read the scriptures, Jesus was angry a lot. Not just when he cleansed the temples, guys. not just then. You think of some of the ways he reacted. You know, he was a little gruff at times. Let's say John chapter 8, for example. They're provoking him. They say, who do you think you are? He says, who are you? He says, what I have told you from the beginning. If I were to say that I am not he who is to come, I would be a liar even as you are liars, and your fathers before you were liars and murderers of the prophets besides. And I tell you this, that all the blood of the shed prophets will come upon this generation. And if you do not come to believe that I am, you will die in your sins. Jesus never raised his voice, Father. Jesus was nice. One day I was preaching on hell one Sunday. I was also preaching on heaven one Sunday. It was that Sunday where Jesus says, the road to damnation is wide and many follow it, and how narrow the road to salvation and how few there are who find it. So anyway, among other things, I preached on hell. And the woman came up to me at the end of it. Oh, Father, I didn't hear the Jesus I know in your words today. I said, ma'am, I was quoting him. She didn't miss a beat. She said, oh, we know he never really said that. People have defanged Jesus, pardon the expression, but they have emasculated him. They have turned him into some sort of a, Jesus is my boyfriend. There's a bit of feminizing of Jesus. Jesus was in the mode of a prophet. There was a certain irritability about him. I have a death to endure. I have come to cast a fire on the earth, and how I wish the blaze were ignited. You know, he had a kind of an impatience of the prophets. Now, I don't doubt that he had a tender side, and he was a great lover of souls, especially to the weak and the vulnerable. But I tell you, he did not suffer foolishness gladly. And he was very, very clear. And but again, meekness is not to have no anger. Meekness is to have anger about the right thing. Now, there's two problems that can emerge with anger. First of all, that the anger is on the wrong object. So, for example, here's the right object. If there's injustice, you ought to be angry. That's a proper object for anger. If it's just my ego and I wasn't praised, somebody else got the glory, that's just tawdry ego stuff. That's not a good object for anger. So sometimes the object of the anger tells us that there's something wrong with the anger. But then, even when the anger is a righteous anger, let's say there is an injustice, abortion. Doesn't give me the right to start blowing up stuff and, things like that, right? But so, in other words, sometimes we use our anger inappropriately, right? Now, go back to, I think there's a very good example of this in what we come to call the civil rights movement. But way back in the 50s, starting with Vernon Johns and then Martin Luther King and others, there came a critical moment where it was time to instill and incite an appropriate anger for the injustice that was being endured. People were just kind of bent over and accepting of it. And so the first job was to instill a certain anger about it. And sometimes you just got to be angry enough about something to be willing to endure it long enough to change it. So they had to have a lot of anger in them to sit at lunch counters and have hot coffee poured on them, to be spit on, to be called nigger or nigger lover, or to be called these names, to have fire hoses turned against them. And during the Birmingham bus boycott, they walked for several months to work, and some of them lived miles and miles away from their work. And every day they walked because they were that. But you got to be angry enough to do that. See? So there's a time to be angry, but to allow our anger to be used as a creative energy and a force for change. So that we're going to stay in the battle and we're not going to give up just because our anger goes away. It doesn't. We hold that anger and we say, this will end. And that's an appropriate use of anger. And Jesus had that kind of an anger. Remember, he went to the tomb of Lazarus? And there comes a moment that doesn't come through in the English. You've got to read in the Greek. But he's standing there at the tomb. And the English version says he was deeply moved. That's not what the Greek says. The Greek says, in the Greek it says that he was seething with anger. As he looked at the tomb and he saw the people weeping, it says he was seething with anger. Angry? What? What's that all about? Here's what it's about. He's standing right on the front trench now. This is what sin has done. This is what Satan has done. It is through sin that death entered the world. It was through the envy of Satan that sin and death entered the world. This is the front trench. He's staring Satan's victory right in the face, and he's angry. He's angry at what Satan has done and what we in our sin have connived to do. And he's appropriately angry. And he says, roll back that stone. But Lord, there'll be a stench. Did I not tell you? If you will believe, roll that stone back. I guess we better roll it back. Lazarus, come out. And then comes this beautiful line. He comes out. It's almost comedic when he comes out. He's all wrapped up in it. And Jesus just says to the bystanders, untie him and let him go free. And it was at that moment that the scribes and the Pharisees plotted to kill Jesus. Ironic, isn't it? It's dripping with irony. When they saw how many people were coming to Jesus on account of the fact that he raised Lazarus, they plotted to kill him and Lazarus too. Now again, you gotta... He said he set his face like flint toward Jerusalem. He would not give up. But you got to have enough anger sometimes to stay in the battle that long. Okay? Now, that's what meekness is. It's the proper middle ground between too much anger and not enough anger. And that's why it's a part of fortitude, because fortitude, if you will, summons us to the battle. But fortitude needs to be moderated so that it doesn't have timidity or cowardliness, but it also needs to be moderated so it's not foolhardiness or a type of an anger that you just vent it and it's all gone. The energy's gone when you vent it. You throw things, you lose your temper, you scream, and then you cool off and you're kind of embarrassed and you just sort of slink away. You vented it instead of holding it. It's a sacred trust in God, see? And God says, stay angry. And use that anger as a creative energy to stay determined to be in the battle, right to the very day you give your all. Now, let me just read some of my notes and we'll wrap this up, but kind of put a conclusion on it. So meekness, again, meekness in this traditional theological sense, I already said, let me just read some of my concluding notes on meekness. In our culture, the angry prophet gets credit, right? As he denounces the powerful and vents his anger. But a prophet is not someone who's merely angry. That's not a true prophet. A true prophet loves God's people. And he's angry when he sees people lost and confused. But he loves them, you see? He's not just angry. He loves them. And this will end, is the cry of a prophet who loves God's people. So again, beware therefore then of mistaking true zeal born out of love from angry zeal. Which, here's one of my favorite lines from Thomas. Sometimes in our zeal, we will indiscriminately sermonize. The danger for a priest is that sometimes we get angry too, right? And we just get stuff off our chest up in the pulpit rather than speaking with love to God's people and saying, look, that's not the way. But we're at battle, we're at war, and sometimes, I find this in the pro-life movement too, I'm standing on those grounds, we're praying in front of an abortion clinic and things can get heated. Sometimes people in the pro-life movement, they get angry and they go after the bishops or someone else that doesn't have the right priorities according to them, and it isn't a helpful anger, it's just a cursing, venomous kind of an anger. It's not an anger born in love, We need to get our bishops to change their priorities. Let's work, let's pray, let's make sacrifices, let's meet with the bishops we can, let's build a coalition, but just angry denunciations, no. That's the wrong kind of anger, right? So again, staying committed, working, doing the long, hard work of building relationships, that's going to be what wins the day. So fortitude without patience and meekness is like fire with nothing to contain it. Such fire spreads wildly and destroys what it should illuminate or heat. It destroys what it should purify or transform. So it destroys what it should illuminate and heat. It destroys what it should purify and transform. So you see, fortitude is a very great virtue. And my brothers, we need it more than ever. But we need it in the way God gives it, right? It's got to be governed by patience and by meekness and by prudence, right? So patience is not opposed to fortitude, but is in itself an act of fortitude. Likewise, meekness is not opposed to fortitude, but is also a form of it, by authoritatively governing the anger and directing it to the right thing, okay? Not the wrong thing. The meek person is ultimately at peace deep inside, even while engaging in the struggle on the outside. This, of course, is essential for fortitude to reach its goals. Since reaching a goal, say of establishing the truth or refuting error, I'm grateful if you can hand me that. Sorry. All right. So, yeah. So meekness is not opposed to fortitude, but is a form of it. We authoritatively govern our anger. The meek person is essentially at peace deep inside. Now, this is essential for fortitude. I'm leading up to this now. To reach its goals. Since reaching a goal, say of establishing the truth or refuting error or restoring justice and respect for life, is nearly impossible for a soul that's consumed with anger. Meekness, therefore, is the courage of fortitude, along with the control that helps to focus the anger and turn it into brave and focused action. All right? Now, this may be a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts. But let me just maybe finish by this little exhortation to all of us, including myself. We're in a war, and we got to fight. We got to get back into the fight. Too many of us have not been on the fight. But we got to get into the fight, and we got to do it intelligently. See? And that's why, again, we're not going to be endlessly cautious, but we're going to ride herd on things like our anger. We're going to understand that our anger is a very beautiful gift of God, but it needs to be governed. We need to have authority over it. So we need to practice the virtues. We need to work on patience and meekness and understand that they're part of fortitude, because at the heart of fortitude isn't just rushing into a burning building or, just being courageous. It is a proper understanding that we're going to sometimes be in this battle for a mighty long time. And we need to be smart, and we need to work together, and we need to remember the proper goal and not get lost in side goals of like pride or ego or just venting our anger on the wrong thing and destroying what we're trying to save. So again, we need a lot of grace from God. But I simply leave you again with this thought. My brothers, we are in a war. Do you have a sense of that? See, I'm afraid that that first part of the talk goes right over a lot of people's heads. The world has gotten very dark. And for most of us, I'm 55. I can't say, well, that other generation, they really messed up. I've been on this planet too long to not take responsibility for the fact that this world is in darkness. And you can't, most of you aren't young enough to evade it either. We're responsible for this mess. I'm not wholly responsible. And some of us are more or less responsible based on, how recently we've kind of come to see the light and we're willing to fight. But you see the idea. I'm telling you right now that we cannot evade responsibility. Jesus said today in the gospel, you're the light of the world. Are you? Are we? Too many of us are undercover, stealthy saints. We only say what's safe. We're not willing to really speak honestly. For example, on Thanksgiving, when the wife and the mother-in-law are saying, now, we're not going to talk about the fact that Johnny wants to be called Jane and is dressed like a girl. We're all going to get along, and everything is going to be nice. And we just continue to cave, and it gets weirder and weirder all the time. Now, I'm not trying to praise myself, but recently, I'm just going to keep it very vague, I was at a gathering of some extended family, and